Have you heard of the shark nets in Australia that have been installed to prevent certain types of targeted sharks species from getting into certain bays or popular beaches? Have you heard about those? Yeah, they kill a lot of targeted sharks, but they also kill a lot of non-targeted species such as sea turtles, dolphins, and smaller sharks. So the question really is, and the controversy really lies, is are these shark nets actually effective? So do they actually help beachgoers be safe compared to the amount of ocean species that are lost? We're going to talk about that on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is a podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about shark nets, and are they actually effective in reducing the risk of being bitten by a shark, say like a tiger shark or a great white shark or a bull shark, that can actually harm human beings? Most sharks do not bite humans. And even the likelihood of being bitten by a shark while you're at the beach is very, very low. You've probably heard the comparisons. It's probably more likely that you'll be killed by a toaster than if you get killed by a shark. And so there's or a vending machine. There's all these different statistics that come out to kind of put things into perspective. We are all afraid of sharks in some shape or form, right? We've all watched Jaws, adults, kids alike. I remember when I first watched Jaws, I watched it when I was probably 9 years old, scared the living bejesus out of me because it's a horror movie and it looks like these great white sharks, all they're trying to do is look for revenge. But obviously that is not the case. As you get older, you learn more about it. I learned about sharks. I learned about the ocean. I learned about sort of the role that sharks play in the ocean, how important they are in the ocean, and how many different species there are in the ocean. It's not just great whites, hammerheads, tiger sharks, bull sharks, thresher sharks, and mako sharks. There's a lot of different species. There's over 1,200 species when you start to include the flat sharks like the skates, the rays, the small-tooth sawfish, all these different types of guitarfish, wedgefish, all these different types of sharks. And then you get to the deep sea ones like the goblin shark and the chimeras, and you get a lot of different species of sharks. So the ones we really focus on, the ones that like Shark Week focus on, or a lot of the documentaries that are on TV focus on, are the sort of the more quote-unquote iconic species. And those are the ones we are worried about. They're the bigger sharks. They're the ones that people want to know more about because of their relative danger to us and the sort of their history on us and the stories that have been told to us, whether when we were young or when we're adults, and we want to know more about them. We're just genuinely curious of something that could be considered a dangerous animal. But, since we started studying sharks earlier in the 1950s, 60s, and really in the 70s when it first took off after Jaws came out, there were a lot more incidences of research and much more funding towards great white sharks and other sharks, and now even deep sea sharks, what a good friend of mine and colleague, Dr. David Ebert, calls lost sharks. He's known as a lost shark guy. We've started to see more and more discoveries and more description on these sharks and more understanding of the various species of sharks and the role that they play within the ocean. Some we have more knowledge than others. There's still a lot to learn within that field. So if you're looking to be a shark scientist and you want to know more about it, listen to the Beyond Jaws podcast, first of all, because that's where we talk a lot about careers in Beyond Jaws and shark science. But also, you want to find out what there is to do. One of the things that Dave says all the time is if you want to go into shark science, pick a species that we don't know much about and start studying that species, because you can learn a heck of a lot and sort of cut your tooth within the marine science field, especially the shark science field, to be able to learn more about it and become an expert within that species or set of species. So that's something, just a little drop of a hint. If you want to learn more about sharks, start studying a shark that's never been studied before, or very little information is other than the fact that they've seen it at some point in time, because we know it exists. But regardless, sharks are important to the ecosystem. They're important predators. They shape the food webs, and if they're not there, then they can be very, very it'll be noticeable. It'll change the food web as we know it, and we'll start to see shifts in something. Those changes we may not like. It may not be in our benefit as humans. So we want to keep sharks around as long as possible and want them to be abundant as possible and biodiverse as possible. But essentially, there are going to be instances where these sharks are going to bite, and it is a risk whenever we all go into the ocean. It is their ocean, so they are going to, predate in that ocean, and they're going to make mistakes as we are to them if they try and explore and bite us. But regardless, we need to be protected, but we also need to protect these sharks. And so the question is, in areas where there have been shark events, like shark bite events, is that an area where we need to put up a shark net to prevent more sharks from coming in the area and giving people more of a peace of mind? And that's really been the question around the controversy. Do shark nets work? And if you talk to any shark scientists that have done their research, they are going to say no. It does not work. There has never been a scientific published study that shows that these nets work, that I know of. If you have seen one, please forward it to me. I would love to read it. But from my understanding of talking to the people that I know within the shark science community, there has never really been a paper that says, hey, you know what, these shark nets by far reduce the risk of people being bitten by sharks and either dying or sustaining wounds against sharks. What we have seen, though, is a new study that was actually published where they said more than 90% of the marine animals caught in shark nets off of New South Wales beaches over the last summer in 2023 were non-target species. With new documents revealing division within the government over the controversial program. So even different departments within the Australian government have said, you know what? I'm not sure if this is actually going to work. We need to start talking about removing these nets, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I first want to go through this study because I think it's really important. So more than half of, so I'm going to read some numbers to you just to give, I saw this in The Guardian. I'm going to put the link in the show notes so you can check it out for yourself if the numbers kind of go, if I go too quickly through the numbers. But it says here, more than half of the 208 non-target species, such as turtles, dolphins, and smaller sharks, that were caught in the nets over the past 8 months were killed. So more than half of the 208. Data obtained by the conservationists show 134 dead animals included 5 critically endangered gray nurse sharks, 4 endangered leatherback sea turtles, and an endangered loggerhead turtle, according to the figures released on this past Tuesday as the nets were removed for another year. The data obtained by the Humane Society International under the state's information access laws showed that a total non-target animals caught, only 74 animals or 36% were released alive. So essentially what happens as these animals get caught, there are people who go around, and if there's the sharks that are targeted, they'll actually euthanize the sharks. And when I mean euthanize the sharks, they're going to stab it to death, essentially. They're going to stab it in the areas that they're supposed to stab it. It's supposed to be the most accepted and ethical way of killing these types of sharks. And I don't know if that differs between species, but essentially tiger sharks, great white sharks are usually killed. Maybe some bull sharks, I'm not too sure. But these are the types of sharks that are going to be killed. So they go around, they look in the nets, and so some that they see in the nets, they'll release. If it's a sea turtle or if it's a dolphin, they'll cut them loose and they'll make sure that they can get off alive. But some of the times when they get there, these animals, like sea turtles and dolphins, they need to breathe air. If they're stuck down below too long, and let's be honest, the people who are trying to get the animals released that are not targeted are not around all the time. So it doesn't take much for a dolphin to drown or a sea turtle to drown because somebody's not going to be there every second of the day or 24 hours a day. They won't be able to notice them getting caught, from my understanding. So there were 15 target animals caught, 3 tiger sharks and 12 great white sharks, and 5 of these were killed. The conservation group said no target shark species were caught at any of the Sydney's metropolitan beaches. So in all in North South Wales, nets are installed at 51 beaches between Newcastle and Wollongong from September 1st to 30th of April every year. So all the people in the northwest hemisphere, like myself in Canada, we have to realize that the winters in Australia are reversed from ours. So their winter is their fall and winter is from like past April 30th to September. Their spring and summer is September to April 30th. And so that's sort of the general sort of seasons in there. So just remember that as I start to talk about this, right? Now, here's the interesting thing is that for a while, the nets that were installed last year by the Department of Primary Industry, so the DPI, They advised the agricultural minister Tara Moriarty that the nature of the nets meant that catch of non-target species were unavoidable. So it's just saying that, hey, you know what, we're going to catch bycatch. We can't avoid that. So other species are going to die, right? And that's obviously a problem. It's bycatch, it's unavoidable. That's not something that they want to do. Now, the shark meshing program, has always continues to be dominated by non-target species. So it's usually a 12-to-1 ratio of non-target to target species. So you're still going to have more non-target species die than you do have target species, and you're preventing critical animals, like critically endangered animals, from actually getting past these nets to go into the habitat that they need. So not only do they physically get caught in the nets, but they also have problems when they when they can't access, the areas of the net if they don't get caught. So the areas that they need probably to survive, because these species will follow certain long migration patterns, and they might need that area for specific times of the year to be able to feed or be able to just kind of rest in those areas. Now, last year, the DPI conducted formal consultation with relevant councils regarding shark management. So just essentially the small municipalities or councils in the area. And the government would consider support for the reassessment of shark nets to move towards new technologies, but it's based on a council by council basis. So certain beaches might be candidates for a pilot program where they use different ways of preventing sharks from coming in. That's not a physical barrier. That's not a net. But I don't know what those are. It doesn't mention it in this article. So I'll try and find that out maybe in an interview later on. But also, so they're trying to figure out times when they can actually remove it. But the Environment Minister, Penny Sharp, has privately voiced her support for ending the use of shark nets, but not publicly. And that's been a real point of contention for a lot of advocates that want to get rid of the shark nets, because she is just sitting there as the Minister of Environment, probably has the ability to say, hey, you know what, we should get rid of this, and this is why. Probably find the scientists, run some studies to say, hey, are these shark nets actually effective compared to the downside of 12-to-1 ratio of non-target species caught compared to one target species caught? Not a good ratio by any means. And so a lot of people are complaining that Sharp should be advocating for more, to Moriarty, for more conversations on moving towards new technologies or moving the shark nets in general. So I think some of the people. So Andre Burrell, who is from the Envoy Foundation, a conservationist, he said a letter in the background, so a private letter, I don't feel is enough. We would love for them to be more public about that instead of leaving it all to the community and NGOs. So I agree. I think if somebody in the Minister of Environment says, hey, you know what, we don't really like this happening, well, maybe you should actually voice it publicly, because that will have some effect towards another department. Now, obviously, it's going to make it difficult, with relationships between those departments. But obviously, if the Minister of Environment does not agree with it or thinks that they should move on from shark nets, that's something that should be moved on from. And so that should be taken seriously. That should be taken with studies and research and a compilation of studies, and maybe a review document or maybe a workshop or two to say, hey, you know what? We need to get rid of these shark nets, or just removing the shark nets in general. I don't know what how effective they are. I didn't mention it in the article of how effective these shark nets are to prevent people from being bitten in these areas. I assume it's better than if they don't have the shark nets, but I don't know the actual stats. I'll try and get that in an update, maybe see if I can get somebody to interview for this type of topic, so that we can get more information on that. But that's what I have from this article in The Guardian. I'll link to it in the show notes. I would love to hear your opinion. Are you for or against shark nets? I'd love to hear you say why. Just hit me up on Instagram, DM me at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean. And if you want more information on just ocean news, to be more aware of what you can do, than what you can do to live for a better ocean, then sign up for our newsletter. Go speakupforblue.com/newsletter. That's speakupforblue.com/newsletter. And thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.